The champagne glass shattered against the marble 2 seconds before Nadia Petrova realized her life was over. She would remember it that way for years, not the shout, not the gun, not the blood draining out of her own face, but the sound of crystal exploding across the floor of the Salle Blanche while 300 of the most dangerous people in Europe turned to look at her. That woman, the man was screaming in Russian, his finger aimed at her chest like a weapon, is a federal agent. I have seen her. Brighton Beach. 2 years ago, she sat in the courtroom with the prosecutors. She is FBI. The orchestra stopped playing one instrument at a time, the way rain stops. Violin, cello, silence. Nadia stood very still in a borrowed gown worth more than her annual salary, in a casino in Monaco, 4,000 miles from the basement office in Miami where she belonged, and felt the entire room recalculate her existence. She watched it happen in their eyes. 100 men who laundered money and moved weapons and made people disappear, all arriving at the same simple arithmetic. A federal witness in a room like this did not leave a room like this. Her earpiece crackled. Asset compromised. Asset compromised. Extraction is, and then nothing. Static. Then not even static. They had cut her loose. Somewhere behind her, she heard the soft, unhurried click of dress shoes on marble. Unhurried. In a room where every heartbeat had turned into a countdown, someone was walking toward her slowly, like a man crossing his own living room. She knew who it was before she turned around. She knew, because she knew the rhythm of him, the deliberate pauses, the unhurried gravity, the way you know a piece of music you've listened to 1,000 times in the dark. For 6 months, Nadia Petrova had lived inside Maxim Volkov's voice. She had transcribed his phone calls in a windowless room that smelled of burned coffee. She had translated his threats, his negotiations, his silences, and his silences said more than other men's speeches. She had logged the timestamps of his insomnia. She knew he took his tea black and his losses personally. She knew that when he was about to destroy someone, his voice got quieter, not louder. And she knew one thing that had never made it into a single official report, because she hadn't been able to bring herself to type it. Once, at 3:07 inches the morning, alone in his study, the most feared man on the eastern seaboard had wept. Quietly, briefly, the way men weep when they've had years of practice hiding it. She had sat in that basement with her headphones on, and her hand over her mouth and felt like a thief in a church. Now that voice was behind her, in the flesh, for the first time in her life. Anton. Maxim Volkov did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. You are pointing at something that belongs to me. The accuser Anton, a mid-level Sokolov soldier with vodka courage and a dead man's timing, faltered. Maxim Andreevich, with respect, I know what I saw. She was in that courtroom. You saw a beautiful woman in a courtroom 2 years ago, Maxim said, stepping past Nadia so smoothly that his shoulder brushed hers, and the touch went through her like a current. And you remembered her face. I understand. I remembered it too. He turned. Nadia had studied surveillance photos of Maxim Volkov for half a year. Grainy long lens shots, airport cameras, one blurred image from a funeral. None of them had prepared her for the reality of him at close range, the stillness of him, the gray eyes that cataloged everything and gave back nothing, the sense that violence stood behind him like a servant, waiting to be needed. He looked at her the way no one had ever looked at her in her life. Not with suspicion, not with hunger, with recognition. Forgive me, he said. In English now, softly, only to her. I wanted to do this differently. And then Maxim Volkov, the man the Bureau called untouchable, the man whose voice she had fallen asleep to more nights than she would ever confess to God or a therapist, took her face in both hands and kissed her in front of 300 killers. The room did not gasp. The room froze. Waiters mid-pour. Bodyguards mid-reach. Anton with his finger still hanging in the air like a broken signpost. The kiss was unhurried and devastating and absolutely deliberate. A public act with the precision of a signature, and somewhere in the middle of it, Nadia's earpiece slipped from her nerveless fingers and struck the marble with a tiny, fatal click that no one heard, because history was being rewritten in real time. When he finally drew back, he kept one hand at the side of her neck. She could feel her own pulse hammering against his palm, and she knew he could feel it too, and addressed the room without looking away from her. Gentlemen, Maxim said, I had planned to announce this in Miami, But since Anton insists on discussing my future wife in public, a ripple went through the ballroom like wind through wheat. Allow me to introduce Nadia, my fiancée. A bride is untouchable, whispered a voice in her head that sounded like her grandmother. A federal witness is dead. Anyone who has questions about her past, Maxim continued. And now his voice did the thing she knew from the wiretaps. The thing where it got quieter and the temperature of the room dropped with it may bring those questions to me. Personally, I will be happy to answer them. No one had questions. The orchestra, on some silent signal, began to play again. They put her in a car she didn't choose, driven by a man who didn't speak, and took her to a hotel suite the size of her childhood apartment building. Maxim poured 2 glasses of water, not wine, water, and something about that small sobriety frightened her more than a gun would have, and stood by the window with the lights of the harbor behind him. You have questions, he said. You know what I am. Her voice came out steadier than she had any right to expect. 6 years with the Bureau had taught her that much. You knew before tonight. Yes? How long? He turned from the window. In the low light, his face was all edges and shadow, and his eyes did the thing again, that impossible recognition. As if she were not a stranger, as if she were someone he had been waiting for at an airport for years. Does it matter? It matters, Nadia said, because in the next 10 minutes you're going to decide whether I leave this room, and I'd like to understand my situation before I die in it. Something moved behind his eyes. Later, much later, she would learn to name it. That night she only registered it as strange a flinch, almost hidden as fast as it surfaced. At the words "before I die." You will not die in this room, Maxim said. You will not die in any room, in any city, on any night, for as long as I am alive. That is your situation. Everything else is detail. The absurdity of it, the sheer vertiginous wrongness of the most dangerous man she'd ever studied making her a promise of safety, pulled a broken sound out of her that was almost a laugh. You kissed me, in front of the Sokolov brothers' entire European operation. Do you understand what you did? You didn't save me. You handcuffed me to you. If I run, I confirm what Anton said and I'm dead. If I stay, my own people will assume I've turned, and I'm finished. You didn't open a door. You welded one shut. Yes, he said simply. Why? For a long moment he studied her, and she had the uncanny sensation of being read the way she had read him timestamps and inflections and the meaning of pauses. Because the alternative, Maxim said finally, was watching them take you out through the kitchen. And I have discovered, this evening, that I am not capable of that. He set down his untouched water. Sleep, he said. There are guards on this floor, but the lock works from the inside. Tomorrow we fly to Miami. You will call whoever you need to call. You may tell them whatever you wish. The truth is fine. The truth is even useful. At the door, he paused without turning around. You should know that the man who exposed you tonight did not recognize you from a courtroom. Anton Baranov cannot read English, and he has never set foot in an American courtroom. Someone showed him your photograph and told him what to say, which means someone wanted you burned in that room, in front of those people, in a country where your bureau could not reach you in time. The floor tilted under her. Sleep, Maxim said again, gently, and was gone. She did not sleep. She sat on the edge of a bed that cost more than her car and turned it over and over like a stone in her hand. Someone wanted you burned. Only 9 people on Earth had known she would be at that gala. 6 were in Miami. 2 were in Quantico. 1 had been in her ear when the extraction call went dead. Miami received them with a wall of wet heat and a convoy of black SUVs streaming rain off their hoods like seals surfacing. Nadia had lived in this city for 6 years and had never seen it from this side of the glass, the side where traffic dissolved, where doors opened before you reached them, where the city arranged itself around your passage like water around a shark. Her phone had 17 missed calls from a number labeled DRY Cleaning. Her handler. She called from the guest room of Maxim's penthouse, her room now, apparently, 40 floors above Biscayne Bay, with a bed like a snowfield, and a view built for people who never had to look at anything ugly, while 2 of Maxim's men pretended not to stand outside her door. Supervisory Special Agent Daniel Reeves picked up on the first ring. You're alive. He said it flat, but she'd worked under Reeves for 4 years. She knew his flavors of flat. This one had relief in it. and calculation, and something underneath the calculation that she couldn't identify and didn't like. Do you understand the position you're in? I understand someone blew my cover in a room I couldn't walk out of, and the extraction team evaporated, Nadia said. So why don't you explain the position I'm in? The op was compromised. We're investigating. What matters now, papers shuffling, a door closing on his end, is that you are, as of last night, closer to Maxim Volkov than any asset the Bureau has placed in a decade. He publicly claimed you. He trusts you. She closed her eyes. There it was. You want me to stay in. I want you to do your job. 6 months of wiretaps got us nothing indictable. Your inside is home. Play the fiancé. Document everything. You do this right, Nadia, and you come out of it with a career. You come out now, and you come out as the translator who got made in Monaco and had to be rescued by her own target, and I can't protect how that story gets told. She stood at the window with the phone pressed to her ear and watched a storm assemble itself far out over the Atlantic, and understood, with the clean, cold clarity that had made her good at her job, that she had just been threatened by her own handler. Fine, she said. I'm in. She ended the call and stood still for a long time. From the doorway, a voice. Your superior is a persuasive man. She turned. Maxim leaned against the frame with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled, and she noted with the traitorous, cataloging part of her brain that would not stop being a linguist, even now that at home his consonants softened, the Petersburg formality relaxing into something older and more tired. You were listening. No, Maxim said. But I know what he asked, because it is what I would ask. He crossed the room and stopped an arm's length away always, she would learn. Exactly an arm's length, as if there were a line drawn on the floor around her that he did not permit himself to cross. So, you will spy on me from inside my house. Apparently. Good, he said. Then we understand each other. Dinner is at 8. He was almost out the door before she found her voice. You're just going to let me? Maxim paused. When he looked back at her, there was something in his face she had no file on, no timestamp for, nothing, something dark and patient and almost amused. And underneath the amusement, an ache so old it had become part of the architecture. Nadia Petrova, he said quietly, you have been listening to me for 6 months. Listen a little longer. Perhaps you will finally hear what I have been saying. The rules of the engagement, the false one, the public one, established themselves within a week, the way ice establishes itself on a lake, silently and stronger every night. She wore a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, who had carried it sewn into the hem of a coat out of Leningrad. He told her that flatly, as a logistical detail, and then did not speak for the rest of the car ride, and she spent the evening feeling the weight of 80 years of survival on her finger. They appeared together twice a week, a restaurant in Coral Gables, where the owner kissed her hand, a charity auction, a christening for the daughter of a man whose business Nadia had spent 4 months documenting. In public, Maxim touched her the way weather touches a coastline, a hand at the small of her back, fingers at her elbow, constant and light and absolutely proprietary. In private, he never touched her at all. That was the thing she couldn't put in her reports, because there was no field for it on the form. The restraint, the way he stopped. She would catch him watching her across the penthouse in the evening. She'd look up from her book and find his eyes already on her, unhurried, unapologetic, and once, when she'd cut her palm on a broken glass, he had crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and taken her wrist and then simply stopped, holding her hand over the sink, water running, his thumb a centimeter from the cut, breathing like a man standing at the edge of a roof. Then he had wrapped it with a precision that told her he had dressed wounds before, many of them, probably some of them by candlelight in bad places, and said, "Be more careful," in a voice like torn cloth, and left the room. She documented shipments. She documented visitors. She documented the fact that Maxim Volkov drank his tea black and slept 4 hours a night and ran his empire with the joyless efficiency of a man serving a sentence. She did not document the night she woke at 3 in the morning to the sound of a piano being played very badly and very softly somewhere in the penthouse. One-handed, the same 8 bars over and over a child's exercise, a beginner's melody, and stood in the dark hallway listening, and did not go in, and did not sleep afterward. She did not document that she had begun to sleep with her door unlocked. The Sokolovs sent their message on a Thursday, at a restaurant on the water, in front of half of Russian Miami. Ilya Sokolov was everything Maxim was not: loud, golden, expansive. A man who filled rooms the way gas fills them. He arrived uninvited with 6 men and a smile, and pulled a chair to their table, spun it, and sat on it backward like an actor playing a gangster. Maxim Andreevich, and the famous bride. His eyes moved over Nadia with a slow insolence that was itself the message. You know, it's a funny thing. My cousin Anton, you remember Anton? From Monaco, he disappeared. Poof. And the last thing he ever said in public was about this lovely woman. And now I hear such interesting things. I hear she speaks 4 languages. I hear she used to have a government salary. He plucked a shrimp from Maxim's plate and ate it. I hear a man could earn a great deal of goodwill in certain circles by delivering her to certain people. For questioning. Just questions. The restaurant had gone quiet in rings, like water around a dropped stone. Nadia felt the fear arrive, real fear, animal fear, the ancient kind, and then felt something stranger arrive on top of it. Maxim's hand covering hers on the table, not gripping, resting, warm and heavy, and utterly calm. Ilya. Maxim did not look up from his plate. He finished the bite he was eating. He set down his fork, and when he finally raised his eyes, Nadia, who was watching Ilya Sokolov's face, saw the golden man's smile die by degrees, the way a fire dies when the oxygen goes. Your cousin pointed at my wife. Now you cannot find your cousin. You have just eaten from my plate and speculated about selling my wife in front of 40 witnesses, and you are still smiling. So I want to be certain you understand your arithmetic. There is nothing on this earth I will not burn. Do you understand me? There is no truce I will honor, no border I will respect, no percentage that will interest me. Nothing I have built in 30 years that I will not personally soak in gasoline the day anything happens to her. I am telling you this in public, in front of your men and mine, so that when it happens, everyone will know it was not business. He picked his fork back up. It was always going to be personal. For 4 full seconds, nobody in the restaurant breathed. Then Ilya laughed too loud, half a beat too late, and stood, and made a joke about lovebirds, and left with his 6 men, and the restaurant exhaled, and conversation crawled back like tide. Nadia stared at the profile of the man beside her. You said wife, she said quietly. Twice. Maxim refilled her glass. His hand, she noticed, was perfectly steady, and hers was not. A slip, he said. He was the most precise man she had ever studied. In 6 months of wiretaps, in 11 weeks under his roof, she had never once heard Maxim Volkov make a slip. That night, she heard him grieve again, not through headphones this time, through 6 inches of penthouse wall, at 3 a.m. In the study, she was forbidden nothing in this house, but had somehow never entered the low, ragged, one-sided sound of a man talking to someone who wasn't there. She stood in the hallway in the dark, in the t-shirt she slept in, her pulse loud, 6 months of training screaming at her to go back to bed, and instead, she pushed the door open. The study was lit by a single lamp. Maxim sat in shirt sleeves with a bottle he hadn't opened and a photograph he obviously had. Many times a boy, maybe 19, laughing, gap between his front teeth, one arm thrown around a younger, softer, unmistakable Maxim. He didn't startle. Of course he didn't. He'd known she was there before she touched the door. She understood by now that he always knew where she was, the way you know where your own hands are. My brother, he said, without preamble, without looking up. Andre. He would have been 41 this week. He was the pianist. Real Talent Moscow Conservatory sent a letter. My father said music was for people whose families were already fed. A muscle moved in his jaw. Andre drove for my father instead. He was 19. It was supposed to be nothing. A delivery. A formality. The Sokolovs' father decided to send my father a message about a debt. He set the photograph face down, with terrible gentleness, the way you close a coffin. The message arrived. My father received it and negotiated a settlement within a month, because business is business. I received it differently. The piano, Nadia heard herself say. At night. The 8 bars. His eyes came up. It's the only part I remember, Maxim said. He was teaching me. I was slow, he said, and here his voice did the thing she had heard once through headphones at 7 inches the morning. The fracture. The hairline crack in the foundation of the world, he said we had time. She should have gone back to her room. She should have written a report. Subject displays emotional vulnerability. Deceased sibling. Possible leverage. Instead, Nadia Petrova crossed the study of the most dangerous man in Miami, sat down on the floor beside his chair like a girl at a fireside, and said, "Tell me about him." And he did. For 2 hours, in Russian, in the old soft Petersburg cadences, Maxim Volkov talked about a dead boy with a gap in his teeth, the terrible jokes, the stolen cigarettes, the fistfight over a girl neither of them married, and Nadia listened the way she had been listening to him for 8 months, except that this time he could see her face while she did it. And somewhere near dawn, when the sky over the bay had gone the color of the inside of a shell, he looked down at her, sitting there on his floor with her arms around her knees, and said, in English, very quietly, "You are the first person I have said his name to in 22 years. Her heart was doing something dangerous and permanent. Why me? Maxim looked at her for a long time. His hand moved. She saw it. She saw the entire decision travel down his arm and rose, and came within a breath of her cheek. She could feel the heat of his palm. She did not pull away. She realized, with a distant, catastrophic clarity, that she was leaning in. He stopped. He always stopped. "Go to sleep, Nadia," he said, and stood, and walked out of his own study like a man escaping a fire. They came for her 9 days later. It was choreographed to look random, a gallery opening in the design district. Her third since the engagement. A controlled crowd. Maxim's men at every exit. She had been standing in front of an enormous canvas of a drowning garden, wondering what her mother would say about a painting that cost more than her parents' house, when the lights went out, not flickered, died, and in the blackness, before the screaming started, before the emergency strips glowed to life along the floor, she heard the sound she had transcribed 100 times but never once heard in the flesh. Suppressed gunfire. Close, that polite little cough that is the least honest sound in the world. Then the weight of him hit her. Maxim took her to the floor with his entire body, rolled, put her behind the marble base of a sculpture, with a hand cradling the back of her skull, so that even the fall could not hurt her. She would remember that detail forever, that in the middle of an assassination he had protected her head like she was made of glass and covered her. Completely, his body, an architecture around hers, his forearms bracketing her face, his heartbeat slamming against her spine, slow and hard and furious. Eyes closed, he said against her ear, perfectly calm, while men died in the dark 30 feet away. Breathe with me. In. Out. Good. I have you. I have you. The firefight lasted 90 seconds. It felt like childbirth, like drowning, like a decade. When the lights came back, 3 of the attackers were dead. 2 of Maxim's men were wounded. The drowning garden had 11 bullet holes in it, and Maxim Volkov's left side was soaked through with blood that was not entirely someone else's. He had been hit covering her. He had not made a sound. "It's shallow," he said, at her expression, already standing, already pulling her up with his good arm, already scanning exits, and then he did make a sound, one short breath through his teeth when she ignored the blood and the guards and the protocol and threw her arms around him in front of everyone. For a moment, one long moment, the most feared man on the eastern seaboard stood absolutely still in a shot-up gallery with his face buried in a translator's hair. "They knew," he said quietly, later, in the car, while a doctor who asked no questions worked on his side and Nadia held his hand and refused, with a ferocity that surprised them both, to let go of it. They knew the layout, the schedule, the guard rotation. The rotation changed 40 hours ago. His eyes found hers, and they were arctic. "Nadia, the rotation was in your last report." The world went very quiet. Her reports went to exactly one man. She confronted the truth the way you enter cold water all at once, because slowly is unbearable. While Maxim slept off the stitches, Nadia sat in her snowfield of a bed with her bureau laptop and did what she had been trained by the United States government to do. She built a case. Extraction team pulled from Monaco 11 minutes before Anton's accusation on whose order? Reeves. Anton Baranov, an illiterate soldier, fed a courtroom story in fluent detail through what channel. She traced the Bureau's informant registry 3 layers down, and found a payment authorization to a Sokolov cutout, signed with a supervisor's authentication code. Reeves, the guard rotation from her report, and the report's distribution list. One name, Reeves, and then the Y, which she found at 4 a.m. in the one place she should have looked first: her own transcripts. 6 months of Maxim's wiretapped calls, and buried in month 2, a call she had translated herself, flagged, and submitted. Maxim coldly declining a money laundering channel through a Panamanian bank, saying, in Russian, that pipeline is poisoned. Half of it feeds a man in the American government, and I do not pay salaries to people I don't own. She had flagged it as significant and unspecific. Reeves had marked it reviewed no action, because Reeves was the man in the government. Maxim's wiretap hadn't failed to produce an indictment. It had produced one of her own handler, and her handler had spent 4 months making sure the only person who could connect those dots died somewhere deniable. Monaco should have done it. The gallery should have done it. Every failure made her more dangerous, because every failure taught her more. She sat back from the laptop, shaking, in the blue hour before dawn, and heard the 8 bars of piano start up down the hall, soft and clumsy and one-handed because of the stitches, and understood with absolute finality that the safest place in her entire world was a mafia boss's penthouse, and the man most likely to have her killed carried an FBI badge. She was still sitting there when she noticed the door, not her door. The door at the end of the hall past the study, the one she had assumed was storage, the one that was always locked. It stood open now, just barely, a knife blade of lamplight. Maxim never left doors open. Maxim never left anything open. Later, she would understand that this, too, was deliberate, that he had heard her typing all night through the wall and known what she was finding, and made a decision, and opened a door, because he could not bring himself to say it out loud. The room was small, a desk, a chair, an old reel-to-reel recorder that was pure theater, because beside it sat the real equipment, a receiver, government, issue, its serial number filed off the twin, the listener's end of a wiretap she recognized because she had spent 6 months on the other side of it, and beside the receiver, a ledger, dated, in Maxim's cramped, upright hand. Feb 11, found the device behind the radiator. Volkonsky wanted it burned. I said leave it. Feb 12, whoever transcribes this speaks real Russian. The bureau summary they leaked to Ilya's lawyer translated "Мы похороним этот вопрос" as a threat. It's an idiom. Only someone born to the language would know. So, she is Russian. She is careful. She works nights. Feb 20. I tested her. I recited Mandelstam into the phone, mid-negotiation, no context. The next bureau leak referenced everything but the poem. She kept it out of the report. Why would she keep it out of the report? Mar 3. I have started talking at night. Not to the room. Mar 3. Again. This is insanity. She is a federal employee with headphones. She is a stranger. She is a weapon aimed at me. Mar 17. Andre's birthday. I said his name out loud for the first time in 22 years. I told myself it was because the room was empty. The room was not empty. That was the point. Op 2. Volkonsky says I have a leak, that someone close is feeding the Sokolovs, that the wire must go. I moved the meetings instead. I kept the wire. I keep the wire. Because at 3 a.m., this apartment is a tomb, and she is the only living soul who has ever heard me, and she has never once used what she heard to hurt me, and I do not even know her face. May 30. They are sending her to Monaco. I have seen the guest list. I know what a burned asset looks like the day before. Someone on her side is going to kill her in that room. May 30. Again. Not in that room. Not in any room. The last entry was dated the morning after Monaco. It was one line. She is more than the voice. God help me. She is more. Nadia stood in the small room with the ledger in her hands and cried the way you cry when the ground moves silently, catastrophically, holding on to the desk. Every 3 a.m., confession she had thought she was stealing, he had been giving. Every night she had fallen asleep to his voice. He had been speaking to her. 2 people on opposite ends of a federal wiretap, each convinced they were alone, each committing the same treason of the heart in the dark. You were never supposed to see the early pages. He stood in the doorway, shirt sleeves, stitches, hair rough from the pillow, and for the first time since the Salle Blanche, Maxim Volkov looked afraid not of guns, not of the Sokolovs, not of the federal government, of her face, of what her face would do next. "You knew," she said. Her voice came out wrecked. "In Monaco. When you kissed me, you didn't recognize an agent. You recognized me." "I recognized you," he said. "The way you recognize your own name. You let me spy on you for 11 weeks. I let you stay," Maxim said. And the control finally cracked. The voice she knew better than her own dropping its guard entirely. "Because the alternative was a world where you left. I have burned men for less than what you know about me. I have started wars over smaller insults than a listening device in my home. And I stood in that study every night like a man at confession. Because the priest, his voice broke, mended itself, broke again because the priest was you." The space between them was 4 feet. It had been 4 feet, an arm's length, a drawn line, for 11 weeks. Nadia crossed it. This kiss was nothing like Monaco. Monaco had been architecture public, strategic, a wall built in real time. This was the wall coming down. His hands shook when they finally touched her face. This man whose hands did not shake while people shot at him, and he kissed her like a word he'd been forbidden to say for 22 years. And she kissed him back with 6 months of headphones and 11 weeks of unlocked doors and every report she'd never filed, and somewhere against her mouth he said her name, just her name, in the exact voice from the 3 a.m. tapes, the true one, the one under all the others. Her phone rang, dry cleaning. They broke apart. She looked at the screen, then at Maxim, and watched the Arctic thing come back into his eyes, not at her, for her. "Answer it," he said quietly. "It's time we ended this." Reeves wanted a meeting. "Neutral ground," he said. "Just the two of them," he said. The Bureau had developed serious concerns about her objectivity, he said, and if she came in now, voluntarily, with everything she'd collected, he could still control how her story got told. Control how her story got told. He had no idea, even now, that she'd found the Panama call. He thought he was luring in a compromised translator. He was inviting in the one person alive who could bury him. Warehouse District Nadia, repeated for Maxim's benefit. After. Pier 9. Tonight. Alone. "You understand what Pier 9 is," Maxim said. "It wasn't a question. It is not a meeting. Ilya's people run that harbor at night. Your handler is not going to debrief you, Nadia. He is going to hand you across the water and report you as a defector who fled to her Mafia lover. It is clean. It is even elegant. Everyone who might have doubted the story watched me kiss you in Monaco." He was already moving, already dressing, already 3 moves ahead, and his voice was the quiet one, the temperature-dropping one. "So we will give him his meeting." "Maxim," she caught his arm. "I need him alive. Dead. He's a martyr and I'm a fugitive forever. Alive. Confessing. On record, I get my life back. Promise me." For a moment, the war was visible on his face, 30 years of the only arithmetic he knew, weighed against the one variable that had ever mattered. Outside, over the bay, a summer storm was assembling itself, and the first rain began to strike the glass. "You are asking me," he said slowly, "to stand in front of the man who tried to have you killed 3 times and not kill him. I'm asking you to trust that I can finish my own war," Nadia said. "You've protected me since Monaco. Protect me one more way. Let me win this as myself." Something passed through his eyes, then not surrender. Recognition, again, that first night recognition, and Maxim Volkov, who negotiated with no one, inclined his head. "Then he lives," he said. "But Nadia, if he touches you," the storm cracked white over the water behind him, "I want you to understand that I have made exactly one promise in my life that I intend to keep more than this one, and you are standing in it." Pier 9 at midnight was a cathedral of rust and rain. Fog off the water. Containers stacked like the ruins of an alphabet. Nadia walked in alone, visibly alone, wired the way the Bureau had taught her, except the wire ran to a van. Maxim's people had parked 2 blocks out, and to a second recording she'd already uploaded to 3 attorneys and 1 assistant director whom Reeves had personally trained her to distrust, which was how she knew he was honest. Reeves stood under a sodium light in a rain jacket, hands in his pockets, and the sight of him, 4 years of case files, 4 years of good work. Petrova made her briefly. violently sad. "You came," he said. "That's smart. We can still fix this. Panama," Nadia said. The word landed the way a body lands. She watched his face do everything at once, confusion, calculation, and then, arriving like a diagnosis, fear. "Month 2 of the Volkov wire," she continued, walking closer, her voice even, her heart a war drum. "He refused a laundering pipeline because it fed a man in the American government. I flagged it, you buried it, and then you spent 4 months trying to bury me Monaco, the gallery, and now this pier, where I'm guessing Ilya Sokolov's boat is idling somewhere in that fog, waiting for you to walk away. How much is he paying you, Daniel? Or is he just deleting your debt?" "You have no idea," Reeves said softly, "what you're standing in the middle of. Enlighten me. Speak up." The rain's loud. And because he believed she was going onto that boat because dead women file no reports, he did. He told her, standing in the rain in his sensible jacket, in the reasonable, exhausted tone of a man explaining a mortgage. Daniel Reeves narrated 11 years. The gambling first, then the Sokolov loan, then the interest, and then the moment the interest became information, and the information became operations. Extraction teams recalled. Witnesses relocated to addresses that leaked. "You want to hate someone," he said. "Hate the system that pays a man my salary to stand across from men with helicopters. Volkov spends more on watches than I made in a decade protecting people like you. People like me," Nadia said. "We're the job." "The job," Reeves said, and took his hand out of his pocket, and it was not empty. "Doesn't love you back." 3 things happened in the same second. Nadia moved sideways, trained, fast, but not fast enough, and she knew it in that stretched fatal instant, the muzzle tracking her with the calm of a man who decided weeks ago. The fog behind Reeves came apart, and Maxim Volkov, who had given his word that Daniel Reeves would live, and had crawled the length of a rain-flooded pier for 40 minutes to keep both promises at once, hit Reeves from the side like whether the shot went off into the containers, a bell toll of steel, and then it was 2 men in the rain, and then very quickly it was 1 man standing, and Reeves was face down with his wrist wrenched behind him and his own weapon spinning away into a puddle, and Maxim knelt on him in the downpour, soaked through, stitches torn open, blood and rain sheeting down his side, and looked up at Nadia across the sodium light. Not to be thanked, to be checked. His eyes went over her face, hands, body, breathing with the frantic thoroughness of a man counting a treasure after a fire. And only when he had confirmed all of her did the fear leave him, and something else, enormous, replaced it. "He lives," Maxim said, chest heaving, the words half a growl and wholly a gift. As promised, out in the fog, an engine gunned and fled Ilya's boat, abandoning its passenger. Within a week, that flight would cost the Sokolov organization everything, because a bratva that leaves men behind is a bratva that has already lost its captain's hearts, and Maxim Volkov collected broken loyalties the way other men collected debts. There would be no war. Wars require 2 sides that believe they can win. Nadia crouched in the rain in front of the man who had trained her, betrayed her, and tried 3 times to have her killed, and held up her phone so he could see the little red dot of the recording, still running, backed up in 3 places he would never reach. "For the record, SSA Reeves," she said, in her clearest courtroom English, "I'm not going to be the translator who got made in Monaco. I'm going to be the witness. And you finally taught me something true." She stood. "How the story gets told is decided by whoever survives it." The hearings took 8 months. Nadia Petrova testified 11 times about Panama, about Monaco, about a supervisor with a Sokolov mortgage on his soul, and the government, faced with the choice between prosecuting its own scandal and burying it, did what governments do. It made a deal. Reeves would die in a federal cell. Her record would show a commendation, and in exchange for testimony that dismantled the entire Sokolov East Coast operation, testimony a certain penthouse full of ledgers had made devastatingly precise, a certain other file, marked Volkov, M, quietly stopped growing. Not innocence. Nobody pretended innocence. Just an armistice, of the kind that great powers sign when they discover the war has stopped making sense. She resigned on a Tuesday, in the rain, and walked out of the Miami field office, carrying a cardboard box containing 6 years of her life, and stopped on the sidewalk. He was there. Not the convoy. Not the SUVs. Just Maxim. Alone. In the rain. Leaning against a car he had apparently driven himself she hadn't known, he remembered how holding an umbrella he wasn't using, soaked to the collar as if he'd been standing there long enough to stop caring, which, she would learn, he had. 2 hours. He had come 2 hours early because he could not sit still, and then he had refused to wait inside the car, because as he would explain that night, with the grave, scientific seriousness, he brought to his own heart's absurdities, "You should see me the moment you are free, so you know that what happens next is chosen. So," he said, "you are unemployed. I am unemployed. You are also," he said, "no longer obligated to pretend to be my fiancé." "No," Nadia agreed. "I'm not." The rain came down between them. 40 floors of glass, and 11 weeks of arm's length, and 6 months of headphones, and 22 years of an unfinished piano exercise. All of it standing on a sidewalk in the rain, and Maxim Volkov, feared by everyone, read by exactly one, took a breath she could see him take. "Then I would like to say something," he said, "to your face. Not to a wire. Not to a room I pretend is empty." He came closer, close enough that the umbrella finally, uselessly, covered them both. "For 6 months you listened to everything I said, but you should know that everything that mattered, I said at 3 in the morning, to a woman I had never met, because she was the only person on earth I could not frighten, and could not buy, and could not lose. And then I met her, and I discovered the recordings were a poor translation." His hand came up, and this time it did not stop. It landed, warm and certain, along her jaw, his thumb at her cheekbone, the arm's length line on the floor erased forever. "I love you, Nadia Petrova," in 2 languages, on the record. She was laughing and crying, and the box of her old life was somewhere on the wet ground where she dropped it. "For the record," she said, against his mouth, "I loved you first. Month 3, the Mandelstam. I kept it out of the report, because it was mine." They were married in October, at a small stone church inland. Far from the water, no black SUVs, no ballroom, 40 guests, and one condition she had set and he had honored. Not one of them was armed. Pavel wept, enormously, and denied it. Her mother, flown in from Brooklyn, informed Maxim in savage Russian that if he ever made her daughter cry, she would end what the FBI could not, and Maxim replied, without a trace of irony, that he would provide the shovel. And late that night, when the guests were gone and the candles were burning down, Nadia woke in the dark of the old inn to an absence beside her and the sound, faint, from the parlor below, of a piano. 8 bars, clumsy, one-handed. Then, for the first time, a 9th. She came down the stairs in her wedding dress with her shoes gone and her hair falling loose, and stood in the doorway and watched the most dangerous man on the eastern seaboard sit at a stranger's piano in the candlelight, teaching himself, note by stubborn note, the rest of his brother's song. He didn't stop playing when she crossed the room. He just moved over on the bench as though he'd known she was there, because he always knew where she was, the way you know where your own heart is. And when she sat down beside him and put her hand over his on the keys, Maxim Volkov turned and looked at her with everything the wiretaps had never been able to record. "We have time," he said. And this time, it was true.